Buttons pressed.
Button pressed. Good.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's very special event. My name is Chitra Ramaswamy. I'm an author and journalist, and it is my great pleasure and honour, really, to be here tonight in conversation with Damian Barr. Damian, as many of you will know, is an acclaimed writer, broadcaster, a polymath, actually, because I feel we now need to add another string to his bow. He is a talented playwright to boot. We're going to be talking this evening about his first book, his beautiful, harrowing, and deeply compassionate coming-of-age memoir, Maggie Me, which he has now adapted, although I want to talk to you even about the word adapted, because it somehow doesn't feel quite fitting for what you have done with this book in transferring it to the stage. Maggie Me was published in 2013, and I believe took you several years to write. He's also written a novel, quite a different set of preoccupations set in early 20th century South Africa, called You Will Be Safe Here. He was the man behind the hugely popular literary salon, which we are all very sad no longer exists, and of course the presenter of the big Scottish book club. Most recently, the reason we're all here together this evening, he's adapted Maggie and Me for the stage in a production for the National Theatre of Scotland. And wherever this play has shown so far, and I believe it's just been in Scotland so far, but it's one England.
We've generously gone to England today.
Very good of you.
So it's in Northampton today at the Royal and Derringate.
Well, I'm sure it's going to travel far and wide. Wherever it goes, it receives standing ovations. It's been described as bold, nuanced, fearless, unflinching, and an exceptional journey of exploration. And to that, I would add that, like the memoir on which it's based, though I have to say they're very, very different, both works do share a spirit of subversiveness, a kind of laughter in the dark, which I really do see as being Damian's signature, and an unwavering belief in the power of storytelling and the courage and generosity required to tell one story. For me, Maggie and Me is both a kind of meditation on and a defense of memoir itself, what gifting your story to the world takes, and I mean takes in all senses really, but also what it gives. So we're going to be touching on all of this in our conversation tonight. We're delighted to have you all here. We're going to be taking questions towards the end, so please do have a think about what you want to ask us. And I don't know if you've seen on your seats, you've got a copy of the most recent edition of the National Library of Scotland magazine, and Damian is its cover star. And I feel that because we're in this incredible building, it's only right and proper that I borrow, just for one night only, its headline, and ask you all to join me in welcoming the Iron Laddie.
Chitra. I'm actually accidentally wearing the same cardigan that I'm wearing. I do have other cardigans, but I'm wearing that. It's getting a lot of wear out of it anyway. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
So, I feel that we should begin by saying, how are you, Damian, and how have you been finding this very surreal experience of seeing your life kind of transmogrified onto the stage? Because I know you've been heavily involved in the process, from the writing to the casting to rehearsals, the whole shebang, and yet, sitting in the audience on that first night, what was it like, and what has it been like?
I mean, I could talk for the whole hour about that experience. I was sitting there holding my husband's hand at the Tron as the lights went down and thinking, why have I done this? And is this really going to happen? Are the actors actually going to come onto the stage and start saying these words that I've written, and will anybody care? That was what I was thinking, in all honesty. And then the actors did come onto the stage. They did say the words, and I watched people watching it. And after about 30 seconds, I started to relax because they were paying attention. You know, I was sat right at the back at the throne because I felt uncomfortable about people seeing me watching it. I thought that's just too many levels of meta. So I sort of sat right at the back, and I could see people sort of, you know, leaning forward. And that was a really special moment. Nobody left in the interval. I looked, yeah, it was really interesting. There were a lot of people there, I think, who'd read the book, and so I could see people sort of elbowing each other, going, "That's his mum," you know. But it was very, very, very emotional, and I wasn't sure if people were going to laugh at the bits that I wanted them to laugh at, or cry at the bits that I wanted them to cry at, but you know, they did. And people really joined in as well. That was the other thing I really realised, how much more engaged people are at the theatre than they are when they're reading a book, which happens in private. So it's sort of a wee bit like having people read your book in public in front of you. It's very nerve-wracking. But yeah, sort of booze. I think I quite liked the booze during our Section 2018 with Maggie in our supermarket trolley in the library. And there's one quite tender scene where my husband Mike says to me, you know, to DB, sorry, weird talking about myself in the third person, but I'm going to be doing that all night, and I promise I'm all right. But he says, yes, DB, you asked for fish fingers and chips, and that's what we get. And one woman shouted, "And beans," which I really enjoyed, and will always remember that moment. But yeah, it was very, and also after that first night, this woman came up to me in the foyer, and she said, "You've got a lovely singing voice." And I said, "I haven't."
That's
me.
And
she said, "Don't let anybody tell you haven't." And I was like, "No, I really haven't." And she was like, "No, I saw you doing it on stage." And I was like, "That wasn't me, that was Gary Lamont." Like, it was very, she really didn't believe me until Gary came over. And anyway, there we go. So I felt all kinds of different things watching it, and I've taken, so Heather, who is in the book and who is a character in the play, I've taken her to see it. I think I'd been most nervous, when I took my sister, my wee sister Teenie to see it. And that was, yeah, I mean, she's amazing, and she's an amazing person, and very heroic, and she's a firefighter. And I love her so much and admire her hugely, and you know, this is her childhood as well as mine, and I was really worried about what she would think about, you know, she was the only person in my family who's read the book, and so she hadn't read the script before the play, and so it's been interesting, I think, for her. She doesn't appear on stage. I made that decision that I didn't want her to appear on stage, but you know, she was getting a different perspective on our childhood, and I think, you know, we've since talked a lot about that time and place. So yeah, I've taken lots of people to see it from it, which is weird, and also people have come along to the show who are relatives of people who are in the play. There's a character, now I need to get her name right, Jane, she's called, in the gift shop at Carfin Grotto. Great character. Her niece was there, and she didn't know that her auntie was going to be in the play. And I said, "Oh, your auntie's in the play?" And she said, "No, she's not, son." I said, "No, she isn't." She said, "No, she's dead." And I was like, "Not your actual auntie, so somebody playing your..." I was like, "Well, she's back tonight. You'll see her again." So, and lo and behold, up she pops, and that's been great. But yeah, it's very intense, and I see something different in it every time I see it. And the actors, I have to say, the actors and the whole creative team who have brought it to life are incredible. And on that first night when that first standing ovation happened, you know, I was like, is it weird if I get up and applaud? Am I applauding myself? And actually I got up to applaud the actors and the creative team, particularly our director Suba. So yeah.
Going back to what you were just saying there about the difference between, you know, the book and the play, I really want to kind of dig into that, Damian, and have you explain to us a little bit about why you made the artistic decisions you made. Because I've reread the book and I've watched the production, and when you read Maggie Me, the memoir, the power of that book is that you are completely located behind the child's gaze. If there's a framing device in that book, it's Margaret Thatcher. And when it transfers to the stage, you get something completely new and different, which is DB 20 years on,
Yeah.
2008, looking back on the past and trying to start writing this memoir. Such a different way in and a different kind of perspective. Could you talk to us a little bit about why you made that decision to move from beyond your own childhood gaze and kind of give your audience a sense of the pain, basically, of retrieving this story and reliving it?
I think the thing about a book is that book, is fully formed, isn't it? And it arrives in the world fully formed. And I think people don't necessarily see, and you've written a memoir and you know what it costs to dive into your own story, and what you find there isn't necessarily what you thought you left there or how things were. And I wanted to kind of dramatize that process of what it means to find your voice and tell your story. And every single person sitting here has to find their voice to work out who they are in the world, and hopefully find one voice that can be them, whoever or wherever they are, if they can. But I felt in a strange way, this memoir felt like a cheat in the sense that I didn't ever let people in to what it was that it took from me or what it gave to me to write my memoir. And I didn't know that for quite a long time after the book came out. So it took me a while to have a distance from it, to have a perspective from it, and to work out what it meant to me. And there's that saying, you can't stand in the same river twice. And so I look at my childhood from a different perspective again now. I'm older than I was now when I started writing the memoir. So I sort of wanted to look at the guy who wrote the book and the boy who the guy was writing about, and that seems potentially very self-indulgent and not and sort of self-referential and problematic in all kinds of ways, but actually for me that's what was interesting about this, was to say, no, look, this experience of a memoir is not about remembering it, it's about reliving. And that's the quote that Diana Athill, we use from the great Diana in the play. And it's true, you have to relive, you have to go back, and that is really hard. It is not easy, and there were definitely points where I was thinking, as you see on stage, why am I doing this? Why? I have got a nice life. Why am I doing this to myself? What does it mean to go back? And there's my husband saying to me, you don't have to do this. I'm like, but A, I've signed a contract, and B, I do. It's kind of cowardly, it feels to me, to not do it on some level. And that's that kind of inner Maggie Thatcher, that kind of sort of critic saying, you must confront things, and you must be brave, and do all the rest of it. And actually, people would often say to me after Maggie Me came out that they thought I was brave or exceptional, and that always felt extremely uncomfortable about it. I always felt very awkward about that because I felt like I didn't get to where I am today on my own. Like, I'm not saying I didn't do anything. Of course I did. I'd studied hard and I worked hard and I do all those things. But I never did that on my own. I think about Mrs. Chambers, the dinner lady, who always gave me extra at lunch because she knew I was always hungry, and she never made me feel weird about it. I mean, I've never talked about her before, but she's in my head right now because I'm thinking about all the people who helped me.
Well, I'm thinking,
I wanted to talk about that in the play. That's the central tension.
Yeah, it reminds me of I think it's a line in Maggie and Me about always having depended on the kindness of teachers.
Yeah.
And the book is, and the stage production, they're both filled with your loves, your crutches, the things that the sort of anti-rampant individualism of Thatcher, all the things that allowed you to survive, and they range from libraries to friendship to Madonna and Kyla,
Dynasty.
Kylie, Dynasty, obviously Bennett's.
Yeah, Bennett's very important.
Perhaps it would be a lovely thing at this moment to talk through some of those things.
Yeah.
That have, especially here we are sitting in the National Library of Scotland. Some of these things that have really mattered to you and that do go against the grain of those kinds of Thatcherite policies that were all about a denial of community.
Yeah, very, very much. I think as well, the community that I was growing up in didn't always feel safe to me. It was not always safe. It was not safe for me to be half Catholic and half Protestant and skinny, specky, lanky, all the things that I was. And, people calling me names is what alerted me to the fact that there was a name for the feelings that I felt about the boys who were my friends, and of course also Stephen Carrington on Dynasty, who remains attractive, whatever you say. And so
these are just facts.
These are just facts, and we live in a time where we really need facts and certainty. So that's a fact. I love that scene in the play where Grant McIntyre, who plays my friend Mark, does his Stephen Carrington thing to the camera. I love you. I love you. It's just, that's all Heaven Suba. It's brilliant. But yeah, I wanted to feature those places. And again, this is a line from the start of the play, memorialising places that are gone, because you don't see those places on stage. Has the Ravenscraig been featured on a stage before? Has it risen from the back, or Carfin Grotto, or Bennett's, or Brandon Castle? Or no, they haven't. They haven't been on the stage, and they should be on the stage because they are important places, and they were important to me growing up. And they're working class places, and this is part of the reason why we don't see them, because it's working class people use them, and our stories aren't seen as important. So it felt, it was wonderful that National Theatre of Scotland took the risk on it and wanted to tell that story and amplify that story. Would that have happened in London? I don't think. It certainly hasn't to date. But I wanted to be able to put those, to show those places, and that's the design of Kenneth MacLeod and other people involved in in the team to make that look as fantastic as it does. But there's beauty in those places to me. The library is a great scene, and when I wrote the line, stories are mirrors, they're how we see ourselves, and if you take them away, we can't see ourselves. And I wrote that, and it felt really good to me to be able to say that. It's one of the things that you can do in a play that's different to a book. And it's maybe why there were so many drafts of the play, but is that, you can be much more on the nose and direct, and you actually have to be in a play. Whereas in a book, you can sort of do an ellipsis and think, maybe somebody's going to put it down, make a cup of tea, think about why I've written that, and then go back to it, or not. But in a play, you just have to say the thing. And so I did have to get comfortable with just saying the thing. And most often, it was about those places. I love the Bennetts. I had asked if we could have rainbow steps, and I think we'd pushed the budget far enough, but then suddenly after a week, rainbow steps appeared, and I was really excited about it.
There's such an element in the play of kind of fantasia. There's all of the nostalgia around the 80s and the music and just the stuff, the memorabilia.
Yeah, the stuff on the shelves.
Exactly,
That's
and
so
the
much thought
TVs,
went
the
into
use of
all
TVs.
those. Yeah, that was Tim.
But also, there is just, this feeling of the 80s of, just taking us back to that decade in a very, very powerful way. Partly, of course, because Margaret Thatcher is a character in this play in the way that she really wasn't. She was a framing device, really, in the book. So I want to talk to you a little bit.
I did write her in earlier versions of the book.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's interesting.
I did write her in earlier versions of the book, and it just seemed so mad. And I was like, no, I can't actually do that. And then, in the play, that seemed totally necessary, actually, to have her on stage. And I think Beth Marshall, who plays her, does an incredible job. And people who've seen the play hopefully will agree. I think she's so good because she's from Fife, and she does not love in any way have any sympathy for Margaret Thatcher. I'm paraphrasing for Beth here at this point. I can't say the words that she said, but I could, but we won't do that. But she gives her this humanity, which is so essential to understand. That this was a person who wants the best. She genuinely wants the best for WDB. She wants the best, but her best is not what he needs, and that's why we get the line later on in the play about you gave me choices when I needed chances. And there's a great deal of distinction between a choice and a chance, isn't there? A choice is only a choice if you can afford to take it. A chance is something that you give, and you can't take back. So So yeah, I think she's terrific as Maggie. In an earlier draft of the play, Maggie, we stipulate that Maggie's wig gets progressively bigger and bigger and bigger through the. There was all sorts of experimentation and discussion about should it be inflatable, what happens with that, health and safety, Beth's neck, all of these sorts. So she has one kind of fairly amazing wig.
I like the line about the L-net.
Enough L-net to stop an army. What have you got in your handbag? Yeah, enough L-net to stop an army. And the Falklands. She's got in her handbag as well. She does the handbag really good, doesn't she? She got it all the way throughout. She loves that handbag.
Because the play opens, there's a lovely sort of echoing in a way of the book, that the play opens in Brighton with you, struggling at your desk, at your computer to get this thing started. And of course the book opens, it's 1984, and you're watching Brighton on the
Brighton
TV.
Bombing,
and it's the Brighton bomb, exactly. And can you talk a little bit about how you now look back on what you made of Margaret Thatcher as a child? And because I was born in 1979, so just a few years younger than you, just like to say that.
Chitra.
Just get that in.
Yeah,
and it's such a strange thing, isn't it, that she was just this incredibly sort of powerful and regular presence in our lives when we were still at a very young age, where we didn't quite understand whether she was for us or against us, or in
but she was
way.
there.
Yeah, exactly, just ever present. So yeah, I'd love to hear you sort of reflect on the role that she played in your childhood.
So I think this is a kind of distinction, I think, between the book and another distinction, if you like, between the book and the play. And that when I was writing the book, I worked at the Times, and I'd seen her obituary in the computer system.
I should say that she died the week that your memoir came out.
She died the week that the memoir came out. And I knew that she died because my phone literally melted. Like, my phone melted and everybody was like, wow, your publicist is amazing and stuff. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I turned the news on and I was like, oh God, she's gone. And it was just this kind of real shock because, you thought she'd never die, and some people say she hasn't, but I remember feeling a little bit sad, the same way I felt a little bit sad when she was taken out of Downing Street in the back of the car and she was, those big red crying eyes, and I remember feeling a little bit sad and also joyful, and it was a really complicated mixture of feelings, and I think it was just that that is who I am, I felt sorry for her because everybody hated her, and I felt like everybody hated me when I was growing up. I got called names all the time. I had a really hard time, apart from with my few wee pals, and I so I had a kind of sympathy for her in the sense that I thought, well, nobody's all bad. Is she a terrible person? And I think that writing the memoir, what I wanted to do was show people, when I wrote Maggie Me, I wanted to show people this is what it was like growing up in this time and place. I hadn't seen it anywhere, I wouldn't have written it if I'd been able to go and buy it, probably. I think I would have just been satisfied that it had happened and I'd had that catharsis through reading rather than through writing. But it didn't exist, so I wrote it. And I think that that was about showing people, and I think the play was maybe a little bit more about telling people in some senses, because I think I had enough time to see quite how much damage she'd done, not just to the community, but to me. Really, around Section 28 actually was a thing that I really thought a lot about when I was working on the play, because right now there's a movement to create a new kind of Section 28, which is about gender and aimed at trans people and non-binary people, and it's very harmful. And I think it's really easy for people to kind of look at my play and the memoir and say, oh, it's really clear that Section 28 was wrong, and isn't it terrible that teachers were silenced and that school pupils were silenced and this was a form of censorship. And I think, well, if you're angry about that, then you should be angry about what's happening now, because we don't want to, because we can't repeat that history. Because here I'm showing you what it did,
Yeah.
I lost, Mark, and when I was working, when I was writing the book and I was writing about losing him, in the book it's towards the end of the book, and I think it's a surprise in the text, because that's how it felt. You know, I got a phone call. This person that you loved, who's such a part of your life, is gone, and that was like, you know, news from the blue. And I think that I knew that if people were coming to see the play, they knew that Mark was gone. And so what I wanted to do was to try and help myself, still asking all those questions all those years later, why, you know, and to try and understand that, and to show that.
And to show, I mean, particularly in the, you know, the figure of Mark, to show just how much is really at stake here.
Yeah, it's people's lives. We're talking about people's lives.
That's right, exactly. And the difference between survival and not.
Yeah, and the difference wasn't that I'm better or stronger or anything that he wasn't. It was about connection and support, and you know, all sorts of other things. But you know, it felt important to me to show that and to try and understand that. And I think I know that a lot of people have got in touch with me about the play, and particularly about that. A lot of people have got in touch with me to share how it felt for them to see the experience of that kind of loss reflected for them on stage. I mean, there is a lot of loss in there. I think another thing that I explore on stage that I don't explore in the book is the loss of my older sister. It's very much a passing mention in the book, that there was somebody else in that pram before me. And I wanted to explore that in the play because I felt grown up enough to explore it. I had more emotional language to explore it, and I wanted to talk about that. So there's a whole scene in Act 3, which is with my mum in the grotto. And with DB and with wee DB, and it was really about me understanding that so much of what my mum was going through was about her grief and her loss, and my dad's grief and his loss, and my dad and my mum didn't really have anywhere to take that or to express that, and there was so much shame attached to losing a baby. And of course there's still is a stigma, I believe, and that wasn't something I had intended to explore, but it was something that I realised, as you do when you start to write, you don't end up necessarily where you think you're going to start. And so I was like, oh wow, I'm really exploring this, and actually in a weird way I really I loved it, because it made me think about this older sister, and I think about her more now, and I think, oh God, like she would be, you know, nearer to my age, you know, she'd be a couple of years older than me. What would she look like? What would she be doing? And that was really nice when I took my sister to see it, and we had a lovely talk about that afterwards. So it was.
And there's something that becomes possible when you're introducing an older version of yourself in conversation with a younger version of yourself, which in its own way is a kind of demonstration, isn't it, of what it doesn't. I love the theme of the play, that it's not possible to change the past. You can't change it, but you never stop being in dialogue with it.
No, it's true.
And it's a very beautiful sort of, you know, physical demonstration of that, seeing these two versions of yourself in conversation on stage. But I was thinking, just in light of what you were just saying there, that I guess as we get older, we move closer to our parents' ages when they were parenting us when we were little. And with that comes kind of more understanding and perspective. So you're able to sort of then think more of, oh yeah, my older sister, what did she mean for my parents?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'm more able to identify with them and kind of understand, you know, where they were at. I mean, I think for me that the play had to do something different than the book. I think if it was just the book on stage, it would have been disappointing for people, and certainly for me not very interesting. I wanted to ask this kind of. It was harder than I thought it would be to write it. Much harder. And I had a co-writer involved with it, James Ley, and there was a team of people, a dramaturg, Rosie Kelleher, and you know, there were more people involved in it. That sometimes made it harder. But it did also mean you had more support for when things got, you know, very difficult. And I think that the humour that's in the play is very particularly Scottish. I hope the people in Northampton understand. But, you know, it felt important to me to include all of that there as well, because there's a lot of carry on in the play. There's a lot of kind of running about, and I think that's the thing that DB gets from his younger self, is that he reconnects with a sense of play and a sense of possibility and a sense of risk. You know, whether that's the majorettes and, you know, being rubbish at the majorettes, which I was. Although I have to tell you, one of our producers was Scotland's Majorette of the Year. In like 1988 or something, and she did show me how to twirl the baton, and I finally mastered it, right? I finally did it. I threw it up in the air, I still didn't catch it, but I did twirl it round, and that felt great. So personal growth is still possible. But yeah, it was, yeah, sorry, majorettes, I digress. But that sense of play felt really important to put in there. And also, like, I think as well, there was a whole discussion about the scene around Scot ads and how to show that. And that initially had been written as being quite funny, because it's funny in the book to decode these ads. What do they mean, VWE and things like that. And actually what I realised was that's another difference between the memoir, the book and the play, is that actually I realised when I came to see the bodies on stage, the people on stage enacting it, it's like, actually that's not, I got that wrong. That's not how it was.
Yeah.
Actually, I wasn't on my own there. Mark was there too. And I just blocked that out, you know, completely, which was a shock to me. And yeah, I wanted to show as well, oh, this is a process of reliving. It is messy. The truth is messy.
Absolutely. And there's so much in the play that is incredibly painful and distressing. But what's so beautiful about the way that you hand it to the audience and sort of back to yourself, really, is that you are so careful that you're not kind of re-traumatizing, or, you know, that there's a whole sort of area now in Memoir, isn't there, about, you know, we should not have to perform our pain in order to tell our stories.
Yes.
And that these are very fine lines that have to be negotiated, and they're individual. But I wonder, Damian, if you could speak to us a little bit about how you made certain decisions. For example, Logan never appearing on stage, and it building to this, you know, crescendo where you're constantly trying and not being able to tell the story of what happened, and how that becomes almost the story itself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk in depth about that scene. I've never done that. I've never read that scene in public, actually. I've never read that scene before at a reading. I've never felt able to do that, and I don't want to do that. But Gary does it, you know, and I'm realising as I talk to you now that I've kind of asked him to do something for me that I can't do for myself. Maybe I needed on some level to hear that said in public and to see people believe that. I don't know. But that memory, that scene, we'll call it the bath, is the scene that I put off writing for the longest time when I was writing the book, but it actually appears quite early on in the book. And that there was something about that for me, again, it's like you present people this finished thing. You don't want to. There's no edges. You don't want to give them a way in. You know. So, and in the play, I wanted to show you that was the hardest thing for me to do. It was really that was the most difficult memory for me to relive, and it felt honest on a level that I wanted to be able to be with people, because I think I'm not telling the truth to readers if I'm just giving you this sort of glibly or it's packaged. I want you to know, because I think also people are watching or reading and they're thinking about their stories, and I wouldn't like people to think, oh, I wish I could be as brave or as able as him because that was easy. And it's like, well, no, actually it's not. It's really hard and you need support to do it. And I don't blame you if you don't want to, or if you decide not to. So the decision about Logan was, again, that was a decision I made really early on. I had no idea how that would work in practice. And again, that's down to the skill of our director, Suba. But Logan is the man who made my childhood a sort of hell, and who haunted me into my adulthood. And I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to see him on stage. I just didn't want to see a version of him. And I started off thinking, well, how am I going to show him, you know? And then at a certain point, I realised, actually, I don't have to.
Yeah.
I can do what I want. Like, I can do what I want. So I thought, I'm going to take his body away, and then I don't have to see him. But then, and that was also what I also wanted not to show, was I didn't want to re-traumatise an audience who were going to have to be exposed to an adult committing violence against a child. So there was that consideration too, whether we were going to have a child actor or not, all these sorts of things. And so Logan in the play is a kind of polyphony. He's a chorus of all the worst people and things from my life. He's the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang who terrified me when I was a child. He's the vampire from Salem's Lot. Again, terrifying. Shouldn't have watched it, but did. You know, he is all of these things. And I sort of think that's more effective dramatically than showing a bad man. And yeah, so that was an early decision, and one that I didn't have to make work. So I have to give credit to the people. I mean, the video work that Tim did, and Susan the sound, and Catherine the lighting, all amazing. They created that person. So I created an absence. But yeah, that felt important. And things like, you know, I got to sit in, the theatre let me sit in on the casting. Which, you know, because I had this sort of like, weirdly, it wasn't about me, because that was just awkward, thinking about me all the time, was thinking about my mum. I just really didn't want them to cast somebody that I couldn't abide as my mum, because I just thought, I can't do that, you know. It needs to be somebody that I feel some kind of connection or resonance who, you know, who I can imagine being her and going through what she went through and being as brave as her and as frustrating as her and as funny as her. And Nicola Joe, who plays my mum, is actually incredible. And I've taken people who know my mum, and they're like, we thought your mother was a one-off, and there she is with her tea towel over her shoulder and her Dominique jeans, being like, what? What's this? You know. And there's a scene where I imagine my mum comes to therapy. Which I talked about with my therapist when I was writing it. It's the empty chair technique, you know, where they say, imagine somebody, and in walks my mum, and I thought, well, we can do that. So I have her walk into my therapy on stage, and
she's having none of it.
She's having absolutely none of it. She turns to him at one point and says, "Does she just say what you say, and you pay for this?" You know, like that, and it's like, So yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No, don't say sorry. It's absolutely fascinating. And has it changed? You know, I remember years ago interviewing Jeanette Winterson about Oranges, and her speaking very sort of eloquently about what it does to your own sense of your past when you write over it. Whatever version you write, that does somehow change the kind of synapses of your brain, and your recollection of it is affected by that. You now have another layer of story on the top of it, which is this stage production. And I wonder how both of these things have impacted on your feelings about the past.
It's a really good question. I would immediately want to just say, well, how does it feel for you? Because I know you've written a memoir too, and it's a wonderful book, but I know you won't let me not answer the question. I think it's too soon to say in some ways with the play. I certainly with the memoir, which is why I wanted to write the play, because I wanted to correct some things that I thought I'd not got right, and I wanted to look again at some things that I felt unable to look at and just hid from the first time around. But there were some immediate realisations, you know, with the play. My dad is in the play a lot more than he is in the memoir. And Douglas, who plays my dad brilliantly, having him there meant that I could sort of role-play conversations that I never actually got to have with my dad. My dad's still alive, he just doesn't talk very much. But it's like my pet rock. But I sort of, what I've realised over time, and in the is that my dad doesn't talk much, but he listens. And of course he has feelings. He's an incredibly richly emotional person. He's just grew up in a time and place where he wasn't allowed to be. Those gender expectations, and class expectations. So I have those conversations with him, and I get my dad gets to say, just because I don't talk doesn't mean I don't listen. And that was a realization for me. Writing the play was like, oh, actually, yes, and it made me think back. And another thing I realized, just sitting in the room one day with Rosie, the dramaturg, writing about my mum having lost my older sister, was I just suddenly realised, I was like, my mum loves me with the love of 2 children. Of course she does. She lost a child. And I understood this thing. And it was just like, there we go, I told my therapist that, and she said, well, that saved us a few sessions. So I was like, great, save some money there. So I think there were certain kind of moments, but I think, as you know, like, it takes time for the work to work through you as a writer. Responses from people they draw your attention to things about the work that you haven't seen. So it will take some time. It's interesting that at the beginning of the play, there's those scenes between DB and Mike, and he's saying you don't have to. I think there's a whole load of stress and tension about that. Really, that isn't about the memoir. That's about the play. Some of those are actual verbatim conversations that I had with my husband when I was writing the play, where he was like, "You don't have to do this," and I was like, "It's really hard," So people, yeah. The 2 situations are transposed, but we'll see. It'll take time for more realizations to come out of it.
And has writing the play made you feel different about the book? Because of course, you started off this conversation saying, of course, you're a different person now to the person you were when you started working on Maggie Me in 2008.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, this artifact now? This is an
artifact. I mean, the book is always going to be there, and I feel good about the book in the sense that I look at it and I think that that's the person that I was then, and it's a reflection of who I was and how I felt at that point. I still find new things in it. I didn't look at it for a very long time, and I went back to it when I was thinking about the play, and I was thinking, well, what is the essence of this book? And I realised how much I saw all the gaps. I saw all the things I'd left out. I was like, oh, Damian, why did you not? Why are you hiding? You're hiding on that page. You are hiding in plain sight. Go away and think about that, and that is sort of... So I saw absences in the book. And I think that it's interesting you said at the beginning about the novel, and you were saying it's a very different set of preoccupations. It's a different world, but it's the same preoccupations. It's mothers and sons, it's survival, it's what happens when an angry man gets a hold of a young boy. And actually, I put a lot into the novel that was stuff I'd cut from the memoir that I just didn't want people to know. And because I'm a man, if I was a woman, people would have been like, oh, why is this, where's you in this novel? But, people have just sort of, there's lots that happens to Willem, the character in You'll Be Safe Here, that happened to me. There's so much of my Granny Mac in Willem's Granny. There's so much of my mum in Willem's mum. But it's a novel, so that protected me. The fiction protected me. And in the book, the novel that I'm writing now, is absolutely, without saying too much about it, but it is absolutely a way for me to express and explore things about my sexuality and about my relationship that I do not want to explore in a memoir, but that I can safely explore in fiction through other characters who in no way resemble me and my husband. So yeah.
Protection is a good word for it, the difference, because there is something so raw, isn't there, about memoir.
It has to be.
It has to be, exactly, because it has to be your truth. And something, it's very powerful that you've chosen to make that in itself one of the central themes of the play.
So,
of what memoir what it takes, as I said in my introduction.
I wasn't quite sure at the start that that's exactly what I was doing. I think at the beginning there was also more of an expectation that people wanted to see more of the book, more of the wee boy rather than the man. I think so. That definitely did shift. I will say that I know this will sound mad. I never imagined anybody seeing this play. So I never thought about the fact that it was actually going to happen in public. I was writing and I was thinking about the words, and I was thinking, because that's where I am, that's where I live. I was never really thinking about people until we started doing casting. And there was a little bit of me that was like, well, what are they for? Oh God, they're going to make the play happen. Like they're the actors, you know. And then that started. Then I actually started to get really nervous because I was thinking, I don't want. It was the same thing with the memoir. I don't want people to feel badly about my mum, about my dad. I started to sort of feel that sense of, oh God, and it's that feeling that you have that you will know very well from having written a memoir of you have to let go. And actually, I trust the actors who are still touring with the play. And that really helped. I got to talk to them and spend time with them, and they understood what was at stake. This is real people, real lives. And they're very sort of respectful of that. But yeah, it was and is an enormous risk. And I have to be honest, there is a part of me also that will be relieved when the tour finishes, because definitely I feel myself much more emotionally heightened right now than I would like to be, because I'm having to constantly be in contact with that material from the past, and people respond to it, and I'm very grateful for the responses. I'm very glad that people are going to go and see it, but I can't live like that. I need to be able to be a bit more sort of calm and a bit more regulated, and spend a bit more time in my garden, with my broad beans, which are amazing this year, and that and I've got a book to finish, so I've got a novel to finish, and that's very much crowding into my literally dreaming about those characters right now, because they're like, finish us, we need you, so that's definitely happening. But yeah, it's an emotional high wire act, and I will see it next week at the Traverse, and I'll be there crying with everybody else and laughing with everybody else, and it's a wonderful thing, that communal sharing, that being together. And I've never experienced anything. I mean, the reading is one thing, but it's quite a different thing to sit there, with those strangers and share that, and have them be so generous to actually hear it and watch it and share their own experiences afterwards. And some of the responses from people have been, truly life-changing. A man came up to me afterwards with his wife. He said, I'm a teacher, I'm a retired teacher, I'm a tech teacher. And I was like, well, I didn't do tech, obviously. But he said, I want you to know, I did my best. I did my best for the kids that came and talked to me. I did my best. And I was like, thank you, I believe you. And, and so people just coming up and telling you stuff like that afterwards is amazing. I think it's a real conduit to feeling for people. That's so rewarding, because I just don't think we have enough spaces like that in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good moment in which to turn over to all of you. Please do raise your hand if you have a question, and I believe we've got a lovely online audience as well, so hello to all of you. We are taking questions from you as well.
So you don't have to be shy, you can put your hands up.
I have more questions as well, obviously. Yeah, we've got one just here. Just wait for the mic. Thank you.
Thanks, Damian. That was great. I was interested when you talked about I've not seen the play. I've read the book.
Okay.
Next week, seeing the play. So,
okay.
Just that point, the conversations with your husband about when it was really difficult, and him saying, you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
What was it that kept you going with it, apart from the fact that you were committed to it? What was it that drove you forward, I suppose?
I think that's such a good question, because really it's a question not just about that moment, but about my life. It's very much that I sort of have a determination. I don't want to be beaten by it, and I felt like, for me, I thought I need to try harder. I need to, if this isn't working, I need to learn to make it work. I need to ask the right questions to the right people. I know I sound like I'm being really brutal, but there isn't an easy way to do this thing, right? There isn't an easy way to write a memoir. I said at one point it's like running into a burning building and trying to rescue things from it. And you know, so I think it was, I wanted to get to the answers that I felt were there, because I knew from the memoir, I knew from having written the book that somehow it would be healing for me. There would be things in it that I would come to understand that could enable me to be compassionate to people, to myself. I could let go of some things. I had that experience with the book, and I thought, I think I can get this again from the play. So, you know, I know this is really hard right now, but I'm going to keep going because I think I'm going to get something from it. And tonight I've told you things, and even just sitting here on stage tonight, I've had realizations about stuff. So I suppose that's the reward for me. Also, the thing that I wrote, it was a very easy speech to write actually about stories or mirrors, because you'll see it in the play next week. But it felt really important to me to be able to say that, because I know that I can share my story and it gives people a space to bring their story. And it makes it all right for them to talk about their story. However different it is, whoever they are, another person has done that. And I think every memoirist, whatever story they're telling, chips away at the wall of shame and silence that tells us, you're not important, you're not interesting, shut up. And every memoirist does that. And fiction does it too in a different way, but memoir does it very explicitly. So yeah.
It's very direct. There's something very direct about that relationship, isn't there?
Question here.
Right
Hello.
at the front. Thank you.
Thank you for the fantastic discussion. My question is around what you were saying about the whole push to have a revisitation of Section 28, particularly around trans people. And I would also like to include people with disabilities in that, because the incoming Labour government, because it doesn't fill me with joy that we're going to have a Labour government of the kind we are, but the incoming Labour government, in my opinion, are already setting up people to blame and other and shame. We only need to look at what the soon-to-be DWP minister is saying about there's no life on benefits. Nobody with a disability chooses to have to live on benefits, whatever their disability is. So my question is this, framing it as I have, how can we all get together to hold their feet to the fire so that we don't let them away with what they're trying to do to minorities? This is so they can avoid dealing with real problems that require systemic change and, in my opinion, further devolution. But how can we collectively, and thank you for your book, because that gives so much of us courage to ask the questions and raise our voices. But how can we collectively work together to make sure we're not dragged back to a place we don't need to be?
I think I can answer. Thank you for your question. I think I can probably answer the first part of that question. I went back to my high school recently and talked to some of the pupils there, and I began by asking them who knows what Section 28 is, and nobody put their hand up because they didn't know. So I explained it to them, and they looked at me like. And I sort of explained it to them, and they really took it on board. And one of the things, again, realising while the event was happening, I said, I realise as I'm talking to you now that actually I wouldn't have been allowed to come and talk to you. I wouldn't have been allowed to come and talk to you at school. It would have been illegal, wouldn't it? It wouldn't have...
Absolutely. It would have fallen into promoting homosexuality.
Yeah, and so here I am promoting homosexuality, and isn't it great?
Every single day.
Every single day, trying my best to really get the numbers up. I'm I'm going to get my loyalty card filled at some point and get some kind of free cappuccino. I feel like
I think they should all be aware before they come to the signing queue.
that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even notice it happen. But I feel it's really important to create a space where you sort of tell that in all seriousness, tell that story. And for me, Scotland at that point in my life was so, I'd lived through the Keep the Clause campaign, and I'd seen those billboards and been really harmed and terrified by that. Genuinely scared, like, am I a child abuser? Why is this billboard telling me that I'm going to do terrible things? And don't want that for anybody. Just don't want that for anybody else. And so I think showing people history is a way, hopefully, it's truism, but of people, at least they can't say they don't know what they're doing. And that feels important, and feels important to me to do that. So, and in that moment in the library, and I got to think about my favourite books and what they showed me. I got The Colour Purple when I was at school. Alice Walker really is one of the most influential writers in my life, because when she wrote The Colour Purple, Miss Seeley she writes as she speaks, and I'd never seen the vernacular used because Scots was forbidden. We weren't supposed to speak Scots, and so here was a young black woman who was to fall in love with another woman, and using her words, and I was like, wow, I can kind of do it. So it's interesting that it was the experience of reading an American black woman that kind of liberated me to use my own language in that way. So
I think so many writers of our generation had that experience. Actually, it was the black American writers who somehow gave us permission to tell our stories, even though they were so different to ours. Thank you for that question.
Question at the back.
Another one up at the back.
So we have a question from the online audience who would like to hear you talk a little bit more about the set. As
The
part
set.
Of the play,
Oh,
the versatile set.
Yeah, the set's amazing. So the set is by Kenneth MacLeod and many other people involved, and there's a full list of them in the front of the play script, and they're all fantastic. We talked a lot about that. The idea, I think his idea was that the shelves at the beginning were like a memory palace. And so the shelves are filled with objects, like there's a Dalek on there, because I loved Doctor Who. There was a whole conversation, would it be a 1960s Dalek or a 2000s Dalek? I was like, it's obviously a 1960s Dalek, and we don't have to talk about it. I wanted a girl's world, because but apparently that just looked like a human head from a distance, and nobody was like, I was going to be just. They've always been disturbing. So anyway, there are all kinds of Easter eggs. I hear a lot from people who sit at the. I've never watched the play from the front, so I can't. I'm not that close, but from people who are like, oh, there's that thing that's Pickled Onion Space Invaders, or there's that book, and they can see things. So the set's amazing, and it's also highly adaptable. Because it changes so much through the show. There was a discussion with our publisher about the stage directions. And at the beginning, it's not customary to have the note that I've put in. It's apparently too long, but I'm like, it's really important for me to say that, I think our set is memory and all that it contains, all the talismans and treasures, all the traps. It's a space, a chaotic, messy space, a space for kinetic carry on. And crucially, nothing is removed, because that's how I feel about memory. It's like, even if you can't remember it and it's like under a blanket, or you've buried it, or it's in a cupboard, or you just don't want to look at it, and it's right there, it's there. So nothing is ever removed. So by the end of the play, no spoilers, everything is there. Everything is there, and that's to do with the set. And I absolutely love the set. I would love to have the Carfin Grotto Virgin Mary in my house, but my husband might not be so into that. But it's great, and also the flashing Dynasty Bennett's steps are really good. But the set is incredible and actually completely built. And I will say that National Theatre of Scotland work on this thing called the Green Book. So it's sustainable. It's made from things that have been used or can be used again. I think it's something like 70 or 88%, a really high percentage. And so it's not wasteful. And it will be stored away, tucked away gently after our run at the Traverse, hopefully to come back possibly as early as next year. So we'll see. The set is awesome. I have no practical skills
The
at all.
surrealism and the fantasia elements that are contained in the set just work so well. with the subject matter
Yeah,
and the
they're
kind of
wild.
tone of the play.
Yeah.
It gives it a kind of 80s hysteria.
All the TV screens as well. I had written a scene which I didn't put in the end because the play's probably too long, but I had written a scene about, we had for a while one of those tellies that had a meter on it. That you could rent, and it was also great because, of course, you could rob the TV meter as well as the gas meter, which was brilliant. And I remember really clearly the clunk of the TV going on and off and the noise of the 50p going into the back of it. And there was a sort of scene that I had written about DB accessing his memories and having to get a 50 pence to kind of go back and look at things that were being played to him on this
what a
TV
great
screen.
idea.
Well, she got cut, but I had to let stuff go. But it was really interesting at the time to kind of explore, like, if I could access memories, what would I want to see? And I had written a scene which was a scene that I had in my head all the time as a wee boy, which was a fantasy Christmas. I had this fantasy Christmas that my parents were still married, that my sister hadn't died, that everything was okay, and it was actually really boring. Nothing happened. It was just maybe that's why it's not in the play. But it was just a sort of fantasy of normality that I didn't ever really have. I got the Mary Berry cookbook out of the school library when I was a kid because I wanted to make this kind of perfect Christmas dinner. And this is, and it was salmon on croûte. This is so embarrassing. We were salmon on croûte, and I honestly didn't understand. I was like, what? How? So I went. Embarrassing this. I've started the story, so I'll finish it. But I went to the shop and bought all these cans of salmon and moulded them into the shape of the thing that you could see on the advert and the magazine, because I didn't understand that you could go and buy a side of salmon. So I was very. I think this is the Thatcher thing. Very kind of ambitious and wanted the best for my family.
There's a kind of Maggie Thatcher aspirational kind of.
Yeah. You can't not be touched by that at the time, and it is
course.
poignant and it's silly and it's laughable, but it's also all of the. And I think there's definitely some moments in the play, I think, where sometimes people don't know if they should laugh or they should cry, and I don't mind whatever people do because sometimes I don't, so that's fine.
I'm afraid we have run out of time, would you believe?
Oh, sorry, well, you can ask me your questions afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. So Damian will be signing books now, I believe, in the cafe area. So for those of you who still have questions, please take them to Damian. You've been an absolutely wonderful audience. It's been such a fascinating and moving hour, Damian. I hope you will all join me in thanking Damian Barr.
Thank you. Thank you, Chitra. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chitra.